Great to see you all. So yeah, my name is Matt, and we're talking about how we at Makerble give charities the insights to improve their impact. So just to kind of, I guess, go back to the beginning, the mission that we have at Makerble has always been like, how do we end every issue faster in terms of like the social issues that exist in the world? And the way that we started off was actually thinking about donations, because I guess that's the way that the majority of people, punters like you and I, probably think about charities. We think about the money that we're giving. And the original model with Makeable was, well, if we can get people to give more money to charity by showing them the impact of their donations, then that will make charities put more emphasis on making sure that their work creates an impact. And that can essentially enable charities to be more effective. But what we found when we went down this route was, in spite kind of having a product that investors liked and donors liked and even charities liked as a concept, what we found was that charities really struggled to provide us with any kind of meaningful data about the impact that they were having. And so they were receiving donations through the platform, and donors were expecting to get these updates on, this is the impact of your donations to this specific project that you're giving to with this charity. But nothing was really coming back, or very little was coming back. So we kind of went back to the drawing board, spoke to our clients, and we realized actually the problem that we need to solve, if we want to enable charities to be more impactful, it isn't about us kind of increasing the donations and getting them to focus on impact measurement. Instead, we need to enable them to collect data better. And so that's why since, say, 2017, we've been looking at how do we help charities improve the effectiveness of their programs? How do we make it easier for them to iterate and share ideas? And what it comes down to is building a platform that puts a lot of emphasis on people on the front line. So the staff who are, say, like working with the people who need the help, and giving them tools to collect data, but then also see some of it reflected back at them. And I guess like the reason for all of this is because I guess if like charities knew how to solve the world's problems, then we wouldn't really have the issues that we have today. What I mean by that is there's still work that needs to be done to address the social issues that we see, and data can really play a role in doing that. Often charities will have a really good understanding of the problem that they're solving and the kind of ideal outcome that they want to see at the end. But the question is, how do you design programs and services that really achieve that? And I guess like just a little bit about me. I studied chemistry at uni. And while I was at uni, I started sponsoring a child to this guy called Angel in Honduras. It cost, I think it was like 15 or 18 pounds a month. And I was like donating this amount of money, and it was paying for his food, clothing, and education. And after like 3 or 4 months, I was just like, I literally can't afford to do this anymore. I just had other expenses like books and beer and Baileys. I just had other expenses. So I figured, wait, what if I got my mates to chip in £1 a month each? Then we could sponsor a kid for £1. And so I came up with this campaign. It was actually someone else that came up with that strapline, which I loved. But we ran this campaign, and we had about 150 students and staff who all started sponsoring a child for £1 a month. Then it won some Channel 4 awards. But then I like went into advertising, worked in market research, and then worked in charities. But I was always kind of thinking about that idea of, isn't it interesting how you can get people to start giving? So that's kind of how I got into this whole charitable space in the first place, and did that first version of Makerble, and then it pivoted to where we are now. So in terms of the way that we help charities is thinking about that journey from like, there's the social problem, there is the person who needs to access the food bank, there's the person who is going through mental health difficulties. There's the person who's like struggling to find employment, probably because of other stuff that's going on. It's like charities have got their journey that they'll take someone through to achieve that desired impact. But often the only real thing that they'll perhaps be measuring might be, say, like the number of people who are coming through the door, the number of people who are actually in need. And then maybe there'll be some kind of measures at the other end of the spectrum in terms of, okay, how many people have we got into employment? But what we want to understand is kind of the black box of like what's happening in between and how do we optimize that journey. Um, and so the framework that we use for thinking about this is, charities sometimes call this like a theory of change. If you're an international development charity, you'll think of this as like a logic model, or a logic or a log frame. We call it a process of change, but we think of it in the sense of, for any kind of program that you're running as a charity, you should be looking at these 5 areas to make sure that you are collecting data on all of them. So first of all, sure, the activities. How many sessions are you actually doing? The engagement. How many people are actually coming to those drop-in clinics that you do, or accessing the food bank, or in the case of one of our employment clients, coming to the CV clinics, etc., and the kind of confidence building workshops that are being run. But then what's key is, for any kind of like impact to happen, there's normally a degree of behavior change that needs to happen first. And in order for behavior change to happen, there normally needs to be a bit of a shift in attitudes. One of the things that I get to do every now and again is, as well as say helping our clients with putting, say, the data collection methodologies in place, is actually sometimes I get to speak to one of their individual beneficiaries, as they call them, the people who they serve. And I can use one of them as an example in just bringing this to life. One of our clients, which is an employment charity, working with people who are really struggling to get into employment. When I spoke with one of the beneficiaries, what he was saying to me was, by working with this organization, it really changed my mindset in terms of the kind of me thinking much more future facing rather than just short term. Me believing that I actually could find employment at this area that I'm interested in. There was lots of stuff that was happening at like an attitude mindset level. And that then led to him changing his behavior in terms of, for him, that meant applying for jobs in a different way, like making calls rather than just sending applications, or not even sending applications because he was feeling depressed. And it was that behavior that then led to him getting that role, which was the impact that that charity was after. So the reason we get charities to break it down this way is so that they can then use those 5 data points as a diagnostic. And I used to work in advertising, and even still with Makerble, when we're thinking about growth, we still use like a marketing funnel in terms of, okay, top of the funnel, what we're doing around awareness, middle of the funnel, what we're doing around interest, bottom of the funnel, what we're doing around conversion to get people to become clients. And that same kind of funnel, which we look at, which anyone would look at from like a marketing perspective to understand where we're losing people and how do we get those sales, we try and get our charities to think about that, but this is the funnel. So we can be looking at it in the sense of, okay, so, and we literally did this with one of our clients last week. You're not seeing in some of your constituencies, you're not seeing the number of kind of people getting jobs that you would want. Let's go back a step. Are we seeing the behavior change among the beneficiaries that you would expect to see? Are we actually capturing that data? And if we're not seeing the behavior change, has the attitude change actually happened? And again, is that actually being measured? And if the attitude change isn't happening, I mean, are people even attending the sessions regularly? Let's look at that. And if they're not even attending the sessions, then it's probably because we need to change something in terms of the activity and the way that's designed. So this acts as a a very practical diagnostic tool to help the charities think about the impact that their different work is happening. And in terms of like those 5 areas, like what does that mean in real life? Well, in real life, it pretty much means um, for impact, often that's about relationships, well-being, getting a job. Um, for behavior, it's often we're measuring like habits or one-off achievements. Um, I'll skip barriers because that's something that we use to think about the attitudes that are required. But it's about mindsets, knowledge. Have people been taught something, and can that be captured in whatever data system you're using? And are people being involved? Are they attending? That's what engagement looks like. An activity is just like sessions held and things like that. So that's kind of the framework that we use, and we apply it to help our clients go from problem to impact, hopefully a bit faster. One of the things that I'm always thinking about is how we can streamline everything that we do. Talking through this process does still require at this stage, for the volume of clients that we have, it still requires a degree of consulting. So we'll still spend some time with our clients helping them think through what is it that should be measured, even though our aim with the product is that the product itself can start prompting our clients to think through, okay, for a project of your description, these are our suggested metrics for what you should be looking at. But I'll kind of go into why we haven't been able to do that just yet. And then there's the technology. There's the product on the right that enables that kind of data collection to happen, be that through our mobile tools or using the platform on a tablet to, like, say, run surveys or just collect data. And then the kind of ways to analyze that and think about what's this data telling us. Now, the reason why we're not able to just like jump in and help charities immediately, automatically in the product, in terms of helping them think through what they should be measuring, is because in reality, charities are on what we call like this impact maturity curve, whereby for many of them, they are still, when they first come to Makerble, and this happened this week, when they come to Makerble, the main thing that they need help with is streamlining their reporting. Little stat, most charities need to report back to, say, like 14 or more different funders who might all require slightly different KPIs from them on what's happening. So what we've had to do within our product is make sure that even though our focus is impact measurement, enabling you to understand the journey through your programs, we've had to make sure that we've got, we call them apps within the platform that enable charities to run their operations. So, and I'll show you a couple of examples, but it's like case management tools. So you can keep track of referrals that are coming in from the council or from a food bank, and then track what you're doing with that person. Events, appointments, like kind of just basic mechanical tools that we've had to put in. And for some of our clients, they just, to start off with, just need that to be working properly, which is good. I must say I have tension, as I had last night, because every now and again I'm thinking our kind of North Star is we want to be helping these charities become more insightful. But to start off with, the data which they're prepared to be capturing at the beginning is in these 2 blocks, even though we enable them to capture information about attitudes of knowledge and eventual impact. Where they are at the moment is here, so we need to work with them for where they are now. But then what we can start doing is helping them apply best practice. So one of the primary ways that charities think about collecting data to evidence what's happening in steps 3 and 4, like attitude change and behavior change, is through surveys. And there are many that exist. So within Makerble, we have like a survey store, which is a whole set of validated assessments and surveys that you can use to understand the impact that you're making. So if you're a charity that's dealing with bulimia or anorexia, then this is the eating attitudes test. It's a 26-question survey that you can use, and it will help you understand people's attitudes towards eating. Or the GAD-7, the Generalized Anxiety Disorder Scale, 7 questions focused on helping the charity understand people who are struggling with anxiety and things like that. So that's kind of the second stage that we end up kind of jumping in with in terms of, and yeah, client that we spoke with this morning, that's where they are. They kind of came in at this level, but now they're saying, what are the surveys that we could be using to better understand whether we're changing people's attitudes and whether we're seeing behavior change happen or not. But then kind of the next step on from that is we want our clients to be learning from what the impact data is telling them and thinking, okay, what could we do differently? And so this is where our progress boards come in. So progress boards on Makerble are a way of just grouping together different KPIs that you're interested in. You can change the background and have different cards and stuff. So that's why this looks a little bit super colorful. But you can see a snapshot of how you're doing. So when it comes to some of your engagement metrics or activity metrics, as we've got here, like children joined, how are we doing with that? But then when it comes to things like attitudes, so this is actually taken from the Oxford Happiness Questionnaire. This is just demo data. But what it's enabling, say, a charity to see is for this question of, I find most things amusing, which is the kind of question that you might see and like, well, it's telling you about someone's attitude. I mean, this is a questionnaire that is aimed at people who might be going through some mental health challenges. What Makerble is able to show, and this is really useful for charities, is this first bit here, which is distance traveled. So what it enables you to see is, for say the 100 people that you're working with, if you run this survey with them at the start of when you're working with them, you're going to get their answers to these questions. Then say 3 months later, 6 months later, 12 months later, we run the same survey and we see, is there a change in the responses for each individual person? And that's what the distance traveled is. So the table view is a bit more helpful, but in the table view, it's kind of saying there are 2 people who stayed at slightly disagree. There's 1 that went from strongly disagree to moderately agree, and you can see who that individual person is. So the fact that the system enables you to see the journey that not just an individual client is going through, by client, I mean beneficiary, someone who the charity is helping, you're not just seeing how an individual's journey is progressing, you can look at it for the whole cohort. That's something that our clients find useful. But just doing that in terms of seeing the data is probably where most data platforms would stop. And that's fine, because you could equally kind of have this kind of data and just put it into Power BI or put it into like Tableau, and you can look at it and crunch it there as well. Whereas with Makerble, we have within each of our cards on, say, a board, we've got these little applets. So like tips is one of the things that our clients really like, because the idea of tips is crowdsourcing from all of your staff best practice ideas and suggestions on how do we improve this KPI, basically. And so the way that it works is when you log in, it will show you, okay, here are some new tips that you haven't looked at that relate to this particular KPI. And you can explore all those tips, you can like them, you can comment on them, there can be discussion. But our clients will then typically kind of get a whole set of tips, and then that's what will then inform staff training further downstream, or they can kind of use it in their inductions. There's ways to kind of just see tips that have been shared about a KPI that you're working on, but that have come from like a different charity. And that's that's quite exciting because we think about it in the sense of there's a whole load of expertise within the charity sector. But obviously, if you just work for one organization, the number of people who you can be getting insights from is just your colleagues. Whereas on Makerble, we really like the idea of, even though you've got like charities that, like maybe one's in Edinburgh, another one's in Wales, they're both working on the same kind of set of outcomes or same kind of KPIs. If they share best practice and tips, as we call them, then those will appear in the newsfeed and be available to other charities who are working on that same kind of challenge. And so that's this third area of like helping charities learn from and hopefully then maximize their impact. But then the fourth level is, and this is like what we're beginning to see with a couple of our clients, is where they are using their impact data to influence or for like fundraising. But again, these boards which exist, you can set a board to be shareable like publicly. And so what's exciting, this is, well, I can't talk about that one. But what that means is that if a board is shareable publicly, other people can see it. And with this, we're hoping to kind of create more of an open data culture among charities about the progress that they're making, without having to disclose sensitive information about individual beneficiaries, but nevertheless being able to share the trends that that they're seeing in terms of the work that they're doing, and that being something that, because it's on a board and the board is publicly available, policymakers, journalists, donors, people from other charities can see that and kind of have some discussion around that and hopefully grow collectively as a result. Wow, I'm conscious of time. So I should probably actually wrap up a little bit soon. But we have a variety of clients, and to just like zoom into a couple. Oh wow, look at that formatting. I can't stand that. Gosh. So with one of our clients, which is an employment charity, the Makerble platform, it's web responsive. We also have an Android application. And so what that means in practice is that our clients can use this on the fly to, say, register information about new people whom they're working with. They can, then everything is then synced to the cloud as you'd expect. Another one of our clients, and this is a very interesting implementation, they called Justice Defenders. They work in East Africa, and they have the problem that they are addressing is many people who are in prison in, say, Kenya and Uganda in particular, probably didn't have a fair hearing to get there because the legal aid system in both of those countries isn't that robust. So what Justice Defenders do is they train prison officers and some prisoners to become paralegals so that they can kind of conduct appeals and or just provide legal advice to other prisoners in that prison. I mean, it's incredible that they get prison officers to do that. It's amazing. They were collecting all of their data on paper, and they work with thousands, dozens of thousands of people across both countries. So they're a prime example of a charity that kind of came to us at this stage, even though the opportunity is so extensive because of the scale of their work, but they literally just needed that help around streamlining reporting. But nevertheless, we have they've now got boards that are set up that are bringing in their data from all of these different prisons that they work in, and they're using our mobile tools and our web tools to collect data within the prisons that show the journey that each that each prisoner is having. So it is really exciting what we're doing. I will close it there and open it up for questions, because otherwise there's definitely a risk I'm just going to keep on going. So let's call it quits there. But happy to take any questions.
Perfect. I'm back. Thank you very much, Matt. I loved hearing that, actually. As I mentioned at the start, I definitely find it super interesting, and it's probably one of those, there's a whole rabbit hole that you can end up going down as well. So I'm going to kick off a couple of questions from my side. Anyone at home, if you have specific questions, please do fire them into the Q&A. So I guess the first question I have for you, Matt, is how common is it for charities to take this, data-driven approach to what they're doing? Are you working with the tip of the iceberg and, certain charities are adapting to this, or is it a bit more widespread? What does it look like in terms of a data-driven approach within charities?
So there are 160,000 charities in the UK, 80,000 of which have super small turnovers. I'm tempted to say almost below £100,000. So what that means is that at the tip of the iceberg are the larger charities, the kind of household brands, so to speak, who you would think probably are quite data driven, or at least have the resources to be. And there's definitely the intention to become more data driven, but it requires a lot of resources. It's funny I'm on the Trust or Trust slide, because they're kind of in that category. They're a national charity, like big footprint, and they're expanding their own data team to even have like data scientists on staff, which is great, but they are in the minority. So it's interesting we work with charities like that, where they're kind of able to use lots of what we've got. Because then we also work with charities at the other end of the spectrum, like Advanced Brighter Futures. They work in like the border of Wales and England. They probably have 1,000 people that they work with, who I think by their own admission want to become more data driven. I think that's what attracts them. But through another program that Makerble is involved with, which is called Datawise London, it's where we're like working with those super small charities, probably a turnover below £500,000, which in charity land is quite small. And for those organizations, it's kind of helping them realize that data is an asset. Because I think, sadly, many small charities, especially, they're created by people who are very passionate about, ending the issue, but they're not necessarily people who have an MBA or even really passionate about pivot tables and getting data out of Excel. And many of them are having to use Excel because they haven't been able to afford having a powerful CRM system in the first place. So our main kind of client group is that smaller organization, which is, I'd say, more at the kind of base of the pyramid, where there's a lot of scope, because many of those organizations are, it's crazy to say, but many of them are using pen and paper, or they're using a Microsoft Access database. Yeah. We had several organizations during the first lockdown who got in touch, and they were saying things like, we've realized we need to move to the cloud because we can't get to our office, and that's where our Microsoft Access database is. And it's it's because that's just the reality of where they are. Yeah. Because be it budget and just focus on other things. And it is incredible that these organizations have been achieving what they've been achieving with such rudimentary tools around data storage. But that's where we're kind of focused.
The opportunities are quite clear in terms of the potential for wins is massive. There's a few coming in from the guys at home. I'm going to ask one more question from me, and then we'll jump across to the Q&A. In terms of, you've shown that you look to analyze data at all different stages in the journey. When people are first starting out, do you find those data wins, the quickest wins, are at the end where you can fine tune the impact? Or do you find they're actually at the end where it's better to drive the data towards more engagement? Or is it just kind of a mix across all of it? Have you got any, starting points for people that haven't perhaps looked at this data before?
Yeah, to be honest, it's the stuff at the beginning that really gets clients excited initially. I'm trying to see if I've got any. Yeah, I mean, like, here's like a snapshot, which is like really basic, but this is just basic activity data. But actually, that's not the best example. But it's when we're able to literally show them what they're doing in terms of, here's the number of sessions that you're doing. We can split it by gender and ethnicity at the same time. It's those kind of things where it's like, people are just like, oh my days, this is so cool. So I'm just like, okay, cool. It's good we can do that, but we also then want to be doing that with your impact data. It's much more interesting if we can be splitting, like, is the behavior change, how does that split by gender? Is there an inequality that you are unaware of? And that's kind of what we're more interested in. But it is a case of starting with where people are at, which is very much the beginning of the funnel in terms of the activity and the engagement. And to be honest, it's interesting. I don't know why it is, but I came across this last week when we kind of, every now and again, we host a kind of like a learning workshop for some of our clients. And there does seem to be, I guess it's that whole culture of, in startups, the idea of fail fast is normal. And the idea of having fast feedback loops is normal. Whereas I don't think that's necessarily as embedded in charities. So sometimes the data is quite helpful, because we had a situation where with one client, they were struggling with engagement. They were getting people into the program, but they were struggling with keeping them in it. And that's why they weren't seeing the impact. But it felt like there were a lot of smoke and mirrors when we were discussing this and kind of like trying to avoid that fact. And it was like, let's look at what the data's telling us. It's telling us there's a problem, but that doesn't mean that we're here to like beat you with a stick. Like, we can use that data to figure out, we need to like, what could we do to improve this? Let's use this data as a way of improving things. And I think even that is a bit of a mindset shift, because many charities only really think about their data when they need to report back to a funder. As I said, they've got like 14 different funders on average. So some charities, the only time they'll really look at this kind of data is if they've got a trustee meeting at the end of the quarter, or if like National Lottery Good Causes is like, oh yeah, so we gave you like 100,000, what's happened with that at the end of the year? And they're like scrabbling to pull all this stuff together.
Let's
and it's
make
like,
something up.
I mean, they hopefully won't do that, but nevertheless, it's like you're missing the opportunity to be looking at your data every day and seeing what are the trends telling you. And I think that's why the clients do get excited by Makerble, because they're like, oh, actually, you make it very easy for me to be looking at my data on a regular basis. And it looks nice, and I can easily understand it. So
Perfect.
Yeah, that's the opportunity.
Perfect. Right, we've got some good questions coming in now from the guys at home. Between the two of us, we've fired up their interest, mate. So they're coming in thick and fast now. So you can open the Q&A actually and see them at the same time, and we'll fire through these ones. So first question from Hamad there at the top. Can the same concept be applied to medical charities abroad? I guess in essence, does it matter which sector the charity's in or where they're based? They can still take a data-driven approach to delivering change?
Yeah, completely that. I remember when we first spoke with a particular animal charity, and they were like, are you guys experts in animal welfare? And I was like, no, we're not. I mean, I don't really like animals that much.
Don't say that, Matt. Come on,
But
man.
I was like, but fundamentally, you can apply this same principle to what you're doing. Let's break it. And we have had charities that are doing medical stuff, because it's again like, what are the outcomes in your language that you're trying to achieve? Often, when it comes to medical charities overseas, it's not just about, say, delivering treatments and operations. Often, it's about maybe like there's WASH. It's about sanitation and behavior change and attitude change. And so it's even more important to be applying these techniques to measure how you're going through the funnel, rather than just being like, here's how many operations we did. It's not that helpful.
A lot of sense. Next question's coming from Miguel. You talked about crowdsourcing essentially and sharing data between the charities. And Miguel's question is, can the data collected be shared with other charities and or to the public? How does that work in terms of sharing data between the charities?
Yeah, so the way that, am I sharing screen still?
No.
The way that the sharing works is, if a board, data can be shared on a board like this. And once it's shared, you can then make that available to other people. So what it means is they can kind of see your trends, but they're not going to be able to see the individual client details that are driving those trends. And so that's how we get around it, because we do have concerns from people who are like, GDPR, can we share data? Like, is that safe? And essentially what you're looking at here is anonymized. You don't know who it relates to. And so that's how we are trying to kind of stimulate that culture of, let's share like the headline stats. When you start to use like the split by functionality to then like split it by gender, ethnicity, disability, etc., then it's like, that's when you can start probably be closer to getting to like identifiable data. But people don't tend to like segment it that hard, and they could always turn that option off.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Again, as I say, going to keep the pace going to get to Jacob's question there. Jacob was asking, how do you encourage these charities to consider the statistical uncertainty in their metrics, e.g. Allowing them to understand how much data they need to collect to obtain, reliable estimates of their KPIs? Is there a tipping point, and how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with many of our clients, like, they're not even thinking about things like statistically. So it kind of relates to the kind of questions that you're trying to answer. So I'd say that many of the kind of stats that are available within Makerble currently, it's mostly just like descriptive. It's like showing you what's happening over time. We do have a couple of clients where the questions they want to answer are more like, why is it that we are seeing this result among others? That's when, statistically speaking, you would want to be kind of correlating different pieces of data, different variables against each other. You'd want to be doing like a multiple regression analysis. And then you'd want to be then kind of showing causality, if you could, by saying, it looks as though people for whom this kind of activity happens tend to do better here. We're seeing some kind of causation. And to do that, then yeah, you can calculate the minimum that you would need in order to kind of have a rigorous model. But that's not something that's really happening with many of our clients. And the functionality around that isn't something that we have added into the system. So for the 1 or 2 clients where that is happening, we're kind of handling that kind of quantitative analysis externally. But I'm pleased you mentioned it, because it's one of the next phases that we would want to add to the system in terms of, and this is where kind of the automated insights will come in the sense of Makerble will be running in the background correlation calculations and then kind of suggesting these insights if the quantity is appropriate. But I think that'll be a great step to get to. But for now, it's not something that we really focus on, because it's more about just kind of showing them their results.
Yeah, there's quicker wins to be had for sure. In terms of timings, Matt, we talked about trying to wrap things up maybe at about 10:02. So we've maybe got 5 minutes, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so we'll aim to fire through maybe like 3 more questions or something like that. The question there from Alexander is obviously a good question. What would Makerble's ideal technology stack be for an international charity turnover £10 million plus? Is there recommendations that you have in terms of tech stack to collect the data in the first place and start working with it?
Sure. So I mean, so I'm just trying to think how best to answer that question. So I mean, like the Makerble platform, like tech stack for us, we like run on Ruby on Rails, currently use Heroku, migrating to AWS. Those Heroku bills are high. And that's kind of like our standard for that's how we run. I think for like a larger organization, I'd be more thinking about it in terms of, so what are the Makerble apps that are going to be relevant to them? And charities really like the way that we price, because we basically price per app, per user, per month. But we only charge for our flagship apps, of which we've got 3: boards, contacts, and surveys. So I'd say for like a larger charity, then you'd want to be using all 3. You want to be using the boards because they enable you to kind of crowdsource those tips, see tips. You most likely need to be using contacts, but to be honest, if it's a 10 million turnover charity, then like we have clients where they're already using Salesforce to keep track of their beneficiaries. Even though that isn't really what Salesforce was designed for, they do have like a non-profit package, and some people want to use that, which we would then integrate. Well, we have like an API. So we would then enable them to still keep their contact records in Salesforce, but then use Makerble for the surveys that track the distance traveled, and still use the boards to visualize that data in a way that's more interesting, while still sending it back to Salesforce or whoever they're using for like their core database. So that's how I would approach it with a larger organization. And at the start of the kind of thinking about the tech stack, you need to kind of look at them in terms of, well, where are you on the impact maturity curve? Is it like, what do you already have around basic reporting? And then where is Makerble going to add value? Is it around there being better, like best practice in how you measure your data? So is it about adding in some proper surveys? Is it about enabling you to learn from your impact data? Is that where the challenge is? In which case, it's about the boards and the tips and seeing the trends over time that any member of staff can access. It's not just people in the strategy and operations teams.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Thank you. We'll jump on to Jessica's question, talking about the boards and visualization. Jessica's asking, what variety of visualizations are you able to support? Can you look at these measures over time for ongoing projects and start relating to any changes in overall impact throughout the different stages in a program of work? So yeah, how do visualizations work within Makerble, and have you got any tips around that side of things?
Sure. So visualizations wise, we have well, I can maybe just show some of them. I'm not set up to show all of them, but something that people seem to like quite a lot at the moment, especially say like the Trussell Trust, is like spider plot charts or radar charts, which I'm not able to show because I don't have it to hand. And then it's like the basic progress over time. Again, that can be useful depending on what you're like looking at. Stacked bar charts can also be quite useful. Don't want to see that against black. But it's things like this, which are like, how many new contacts are we registering per project? How many contacts are we interacting with per project, per month? It's being able to like drill down into that granular data that people find quite useful. So the stacked bar charts do tend to be the one that people find useful, as well as like the pie charts and the radar charts. it's a shame I don't have a radar chart example to hand. If I can find one in the next couple of seconds, I will show one, because the way that they're used by our clients is if they want to compare different perspectives. So one of our clients, the Kids Network, they provide mentors who are in their 20s and 30s typically to children aged 7 to 15. And they provide mentoring to that child over the course of a year. What they were historically doing was running a survey with those children at the beginning of the year and at the end to kind of see, like, how does the child feel that they've grown in confidence and self-belief and all these things. What they're able to do with Makerble is run that same survey, but using our essentially 360 feedback, or we call it perspectives. They can send that same survey to the parents of the child, the mentor, the teacher, and a couple of other people if they need to, and then see the responses from all of those people plotted on a spider plot chart for that one child. And then they can see what's the mean average across all of the children, and how does that vary from the mean average perspective from all of the parents or from all of the mentors. So the spider plot charts are quite helpful because I think it's enabling charities to be more rigorous in terms of how they think about the impact that they're making, especially when it's something like attitude change, because yeah, asking the individual is great, but it's also great if you can get perspectives from the other people around them. If there's a discrepancy, maybe that suggests that change is required. And that's fundamentally what Makerble is all about. It's kind of helping charities answer the question of what data are we looking at that tells us we need to change something. And so whenever we think about visualizations, it's more from the perspective of, is this giving someone some information that will hopefully cause them to see where a problem exists, which sounds quite negative, but we make it look good. So
it's what drives change as well, isn't it? If you didn't know it was there, you know, you better to know a problem exists, aren't you? And then you can fix it. So, man, I feel like we could sit here all afternoon just kind of chatting away and drilling into a few bits and pieces and different use cases. But I am very conscious of time, so we are going to start to wrap things up a little bit. I just wanted to again say thank you, Matt, for joining us. Really fantastic presentation. It was good to have you back after 4 or 5 years or whatever it is, and see what you're doing still with Makerble, which is great. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, we'll be having you back. Hopefully, maybe even for a live event at some point this year. We can have a slice of pizza or something, can't we? So, yeah, thank you very much, Matt. Thank you all you guys at home and around the world for joining. Those that we didn't get to the questions, I'm really sorry. We'll do our best to get through as many as we can. But yeah, for now, we're going to wrap things up here. And yeah, thank you very much, Matt. And I'll speak to you soon.
No worries. Feel free to tweet me if you have any questions that we didn't get around to. The details are in there. The details are available.
Inbound. Sounds good. Cheers, Matt. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.